In a quiet little town where everyone knew each other's names, there lived a young boy named Marcus Johnson. He was 12 years old and full of dreams. His family had recently moved to this suburban neighborhood after his dad got a new job in the city. For Marcus, starting at Lincoln Middle School felt like both an adventure and a challenge. The school building looked big and imposing, but he tried to focus on the positives: new friends, exciting classes, and maybe even joining the basketball team. On his very first day, Marcus woke up early, dressed neatly in his uniform, and grabbed his backpack with care. Inside were notebooks filled with blank pages waiting to be written on, pens ready to scribble ideas, and textbooks that smelled fresh from the store. As he walked into the classroom assigned to him, he noticed curious glances from some students. Some smiled shyly, while others whispered behind their hands. It wasn't unusual for someone new to attract attention, so Marcus didn't think much of it. But soon enough, he realized that not all eyes were friendly. Sitting at the front of the room was Ms. Harper, the teacher everyone seemed to either fear or dislike. She was tall, stern-looking, and always carried a ruler in her hand as if it were a symbol of authority. Her reputation preceded her. Parents often warned their kids about how strict she could be. But what they didn't mention, and what Marcus would soon discover, was something far more troubling. Ms. Harper began calling roll call, pronouncing each student's name slowly and deliberately. When she reached Marcus Johnson, her voice lingered on his last name longer than necessary. There was a pause before she said, yes, another Johnson." Though no one laughed aloud, Marcus caught the subtle smirks exchanged between a few classmates. He brushed it off, assuming it was just typical teasing reserved for newcomers. As the days went by, however, Marcus started noticing patterns in Ms. Harper's behavior. During lessons, she rarely called on him unless it was to point out mistakes, even when he raised his hand eagerly. Once, during English class, Marcus answered a question correctly about grammar rules. Instead of acknowledging his effort, Ms. Harper asked sarcastically, "Did you learn that from your old school, or did you guess?" The comment stung, but Marcus told himself it was probably nothing personal. Maybe she was having a bad day. Unfortunately, her remarks only grew harsher over time. In science class, when Marcus presented his project on renewable energy, a topic he'd spent weeks researching, Ms. Harper interrupted him midway. "Interesting work," she said dryly, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But I wonder if you truly understand these concepts or if you simply copied them from somewhere." The classroom fell silent, and Marcus felt heat rising to his cheeks. He wanted to defend himself, to explain how hard he'd worked, but the words stuck in his throat. What made things worse was the way Ms. Harper treated other students differently based on their race. White students received praise for average efforts, while black and brown students like Marcus were met with skepticism. One afternoon, during a history lesson about slavery, Marcus listened intently as Ms. Harper described events from centuries ago. When she opened the floor for discussion, Marcus hesitated for a moment before raising his hand. He wanted to share his thoughts, not just as a student, but as someone whose ancestors had lived through those painful times. When Ms. Harper finally called on him, Marcus spoke softly at first, then gained confidence as he talked about resilience and hope. But instead of listening, she cut him off mid-sentence. "You know," she said loudly enough for the entire class to hear, "if people had worked harder back then, we wouldn't still have so many problems today." Gasps echoed around the room, followed by awkward silence. Marcus froze, unsure whether to cry or argue. He settled for staring down at his desk, wishing he could disappear. Each night, Marcus returned home feeling drained. His mom, Angela, noticed the change almost immediately. Gone was the cheerful boy who used to excitedly recount stories from school. Now he barely spoke during dinner, pushing food around his plate absent-mindedly. Concerned, Angela sat him down one evening and asked gently, "What's going on, sweetheart? You seem upset." At first, Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to burden his mom with problems from school, but eventually the weight became too heavy to carry alone. With tears streaming down his face, he recounted everything, from Ms. Harper's snide comments to the humiliating moments in front of his peers. Angela listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every word. By the end of his story, Angela's fists were clenched tightly. She hugged Marcus close, promising to protect him. "No one gets to treat my baby like that," she said firmly. "We're going to fix this together." Though Marcus appreciated her determination, part of him worried about making things worse. What if speaking up only angered Ms. Harper further? What if his classmates turned against him? Despite his fears, Angela sprang into action. She encouraged Marcus to write down every incident, noting dates, times, and details. She also reached out to his older sister, Jasmine, who attended high school nearby. Together, they brainstormed ways to gather evidence. Jasmine suggested recording Ms. Harper secretly using Marcus's phone, ensuring they had concrete proof of her discriminatory behavior. Over the next few weeks, Marcus continued enduring Ms. Harper's abuse, though now with a sense of purpose. Every insult, every unfair grade, and every dismissive glance fueled his resolve to expose the truth. Little did he know, help was closer than he thought, and karma was already setting its wheels in motion. Let me know if you'd like me to expand further or continue developing the next parts. The tension in Ms. Harper's classroom only grew thicker as the weeks passed. Marcus tried his best to stay focused on his studies, but it was becoming harder and harder to ignore the constant stream of insults and unfair treatment. Every day felt like walking into a battlefield where he had no weapons to defend himself. Ms. Harper's sharp tongue seemed sharper than ever, cutting deeper with each passing moment. One afternoon during math class, Marcus found himself particularly determined to prove that he wasn't the lazy or incompetent student Ms. Harper often implied he was. The lesson revolved around solving equations, a topic Marcus excelled at thanks to countless hours spent practicing with his sister Jasmine. When Ms. Harper posed a challenging problem on the board, Marcus's hand shot up almost instinctively. He knew the answer, and he wanted to show her that she was wrong about him. Ms. Harper scanned the room, her gaze lingering on Marcus for just a second too long before calling on him. "Yes, Mr. Johnson?" she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Marcus stood up confidently, his voice steady as he walked through the steps of the solution. His explanation was clear, concise, and correct. For a brief moment he allowed himself to feel a flicker of pride, but instead of acknowledging his effort, Ms. Harper's lips curled into a sneer. "Are you sure you didn't just copy that from someone else?" she asked loudly, her words echoing across the silent classroom. A few students snickered nervously, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus froze, his confidence crumbling under the weight of her accusation. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Instead, he sat back down, his face burning with shame. That evening, Marcus trudged home with his head hung low. He couldn't shake off the image of his classmates laughing at him, even though most of them hadn't meant any harm. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was anger. Anger at Ms. Harper for treating him unfairly, anger at himself for letting her get to him, and anger at the world for allowing such things to happen in the first place. When he walked through the door, Angela immediately noticed the defeated look on her son's face. She set aside the groceries she'd been unpacking and pulled him into a tight hug. "What happened today?" she asked softly, brushing his hair away from his forehead. Marcus hesitated, unsure if he should burden her with yet another story of Ms. Harper's cruelty. But then he remembered what his mom had promised. They were going to fix this together. Taking a deep breath, Marcus recounted the entire incident. The math problem, his perfect solution, and Ms. Harper's cutting remark. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his cheeks. Angela listened silently, her jaw tightening with every word. When Marcus finally looked up at her, he saw a fire blazing in her eyes, a fire he hadn't seen since the time someone had tried to accuse her of shoplifting at the grocery store years ago. "That's it," Angela declared firmly, standing up straight. "I've heard enough. No one talks to my child like that." She grabbed a notebook from the kitchen counter and began jotting down notes. Dates, times, specific incidents. Everything Marcus had told her went onto the page. "We need proof," she explained. and we need witnesses. Over the next few days, Angela sprang into action. She started by reaching out to other parents whose children attended Lincoln Middle School. While some were hesitant to speak up, fearing retaliation from the school administration, others shared similar stories of Ms. Harper's discriminatory behavior. One mother revealed that her daughter, a Latina student, had been repeatedly mocked for her accent. Another parent confessed that their son, who was mixed race, had been singled out for punishment more often than his white classmates. Meanwhile, Marcus continued documenting everything that happened in Ms. Harper's class. With Jasmine's help, he learned how to use his phone discreetly to record audio without drawing attention. They practiced during family dinners, ensuring that the recordings would be clear enough to capture Ms. Harper's voice. At first, Marcus felt guilty about recording her. Wasn't it wrong to spy on someone? But Jasmine reminded him that they weren't doing anything illegal. They were simply gathering evidence to protect themselves. Back at school, Marcus's growing frustration reached a boiling point during a history presentation. The assignment was to research and present on a civil rights leader of their choice. Marcus chose Malcolm X, inspired by his messages of empowerment and self-reliance. He spent hours preparing, crafting slides, and rehearsing his speech until he could deliver it flawlessly. On the day of the presentation, Marcus stood nervously in front of the class, clutching his notes tightly. As he began speaking, his voice wavered slightly, but he quickly found his rhythm. He talked about Malcolm X's early life, his transformation in prison, and his unwavering commitment to fighting racial injustice. The room grew quiet as Marcus spoke passionately, his words resonating with many of his classmates. Just as he was about to transition into discussing Malcolm X's legacy, Ms. Harper interrupted him mid-sentence. "Hold on a second," she said, her tone laced with disdain. "Maybe if your people had worked harder back then, we wouldn't still be dealing with these issues today." The room erupted in gasps, followed by an eerie silence. Marcus felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. His hands trembled, and his vision blurred with tears. For a moment, no one dared to move. Even the students who usually laughed at Ms. Harper's jokes sat frozen, shocked by the audacity of her comment. Marcus stumbled back to his seat, unable to continue. That night he cried himself to sleep, wondering if he would ever escape the toxic environment of Ms. Harper's classroom. Angela, however, refused to let the matter rest. She called an emergency meeting with Marcus and Jasmine, laying out a plan of action. "We're taking this to the principal," she announced. "If they won't listen, we'll go higher. To the school board, the media, anyone who will pay attention." Her determination gave Marcus a glimmer of hope, but it also scared him. What if confronting Ms. Harper made things worse? What if she retaliated? Despite his fears, Marcus nodded in agreement. He realized that staying silent would only allow Ms. Harper to continue hurting others. If he didn't stand up now, who would? With renewed resolve, he joined forces with his mom and sister, ready to fight back against the injustice he had endured for far too long. Little did they know, their efforts were about to trigger a chain reaction that would change everything, not just for Marcus, but for everyone at Lincoln Middle School. Karma, as Angela liked to say, had a way of catching up with people sooner or later. And for Ms. Harper, it was closer than she ever imagined. "Let me know if you'd like me to proceed with expanding Part 3 or make any adjustments." The weekend after Marcus's humiliating history presentation felt like the longest 2 days of his life. He stayed mostly in his room, avoiding conversations with anyone except Jasmine, who kept trying to cheer him up. Angela, on the other hand, barely sat still. She paced around the house, clutching the notebook filled with evidence they had gathered against Ms. Harper. Her mind was racing with plans, strategies, and worst-case scenarios. One thing was certain: she wasn't going to let this slide. Honor. Monday morning, Angela woke up early, dressed in her most professional outfit, a crisp white blouse paired with a navy blue blazer, and headed straight to Lincoln Middle School. She didn't call ahead or schedule an appointment. She wanted to catch Principal Thompson off guard. If there was one thing Angela knew how to do well, it was making an entrance. And today, she intended to make sure everyone paid attention. When Angela arrived at the school office. The secretary looked surprised but quickly buzzed her into Principal Thompson's office. The principal, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose, glanced up from his desk with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. "Mrs. Johnson?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "What brings you here? Today?" Angela wasted no time getting to the point. She placed the notebook on his desk and began explaining everything. Every cruel comment, every unfair grade, every moment of humiliation Marcus had endured under Ms. Harper's watch. Her voice remained calm but firm, each word laced with authority. As she spoke, Principal Thompson's expression shifted from mild irritation to visible discomfort. He fidgeted with his pen, occasionally nodding as if trying to process the gravity of what he was hearing. "I understand your concerns," he said finally, clearing his throat. "But these are serious allegations, Mrs. Johnson. Do you have any proof to back them up?" Angela smiled, a polite yet steely smile that sent a clear message. She was prepared. From her bag, she pulled out a folder containing not only Marcus's written accounts but also transcripts of the audio recordings they had secretly captured. She handed them over without hesitation. "You'll find detailed notes here," she explained, tapping the folder. "And yes, I have recordings. But before we dive into all of that, I'd like to ask, has anyone else raised similar complaints about Ms. Harper?" Principal Thompson hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Angela's thoroughness. After a long pause, he admitted reluctantly that there had been a few isolated incidents reported over the years. However, he insisted they were minor and had been addressed accordingly. Angela arched an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "Isolated incidents?" she repeated, her tone sharp. "Because from where I'm standing, this seems like a pattern, a dangerous one." The principal shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He promised to investigate further and assured Angela that appropriate action would be taken if her claims proved valid. But Angela wasn't satisfied with vague promises. She leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Let me be very clear," she said. "If nothing changes, I will escalate this matter. That means contacting the school board, filing a formal complaint, and possibly involving legal counsel. Is that what you want, Mr. Thompson?" Her words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Principal Thompson nodded stiffly. "I'll look into it immediately," he muttered, clearly eager to end the conversation. As Angela left the office, she felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. On one hand, she had laid down the groundwork for holding Ms. Harper accountable. On the other hand, she knew better than to trust empty assurances from people in power. Still, she allowed herself a small smile as she walked out of the building. Karma might take its time, but Angela was determined to speed things along. Back at home, Marcus anxiously awaited his mom's return. When she walked through the door, he could tell by the look on her face that something significant had happened. Angela recounted the meeting in detail, emphasizing how Principal Thompson had squirmed under pressure. Marcus listened intently, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally moving in the right direction. But hope can be fragile, especially when faced with resistance. Word of Angela's visit spread quickly among the staff at Lincoln Middle School, including Ms. Harper. By lunchtime, rumors were swirling about a parent causing trouble for the veteran teacher. At first, Ms. Partner dismissed it as gossip until she realized the troublemaker was none other than Marcus's mother. Furious, Ms. Harper stormed into the teacher's lounge during her break, slamming her coffee mug onto the counter. "Can you believe this?" she snapped at her colleagues. "That woman thinks she can waltz in here and accuse me of whatever nonsense she's spewing, as if I don't already deal with enough disrespect from students." Her rant drew mixed reactions. Some teachers exchanged nervous glances while others nodded sympathetically. A few even chimed in, defending Ms. Harper's reputation as a dedicated educator. But deep down, many of them couldn't ignore the whispers about her harsh treatment of minority students. They chose to stay silent, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth. Ms. Harper's anger only fueled her determination to punish Marcus further. She decided to make an example out of him, to show everyone that no amount of parental interference would sway her authority. The next day in class, she singled him out more aggressively than ever before. During a reading assignment, she criticized his pronunciation of a word, claiming he didn't sound educated. When another student tried to defend Marcus, saying he had pronounced it correctly, Ms. Harper shot back, "Don't you start too. Stick to your own business." Marcus clenched his fists under his desk, fighting back tears. He hated feeling powerless, but he reminded himself of what his mom had said. They were building a case and patience was key. Still, it was hard not to lash out when injustice stared him in the face every single day. Meanwhile, Angela wasn't done fighting. Knowing that Principal Thompson might drag his feet, she decided to rally additional support. She reached out to Marcus's classmates, encouraging them to come forward if they had witnessed Ms. Harper's discriminatory behavior. To her surprise, several students agreed to help. Among them was Emily Carter, a quiet girl with curly blonde hair who sat near Marcus in class. Emily had always admired Marcus's intelligence and kindness, and seeing him treated so unfairly broke her heart. When Angela approached her parents, explaining the situation, they encouraged Emily to testify alongside Marcus. Together, the group began compiling testimonies, not just from current students but also from former ones who had graduated and were willing to share their experiences. Jasmine played a crucial role in organizing everything. She created a shared document online where students could type out their stories anonymously if they preferred. Within days, the document grew longer and longer, filled with heartbreaking accounts of bias, favoritism, and outright racism. Some described being mocked for their accents, while others recalled being unfairly punished for minor infractions. One former student even revealed that Ms. Harper had once told her she'd never succeed because of her background. With this growing body of evidence, Angela felt more confident than ever. She scheduled another meeting with Principal Thompson, this time armed with not only Marcus's story but also the collective voices of numerous students. She hoped the sheer volume of complaints would force the administration to take immediate action. Unbeknownst to Angela, however, karma was already setting its wheels in motion. While she focused on gathering support, fate had a surprise in store for Ms. Harper, one that would shake the foundation of her carefully constructed world. Someone from her past was about to reappear, bringing with them secrets and truths that even Ms. Harper couldn't deny. For now, though, Marcus held on tightly to the hope that justice was within reach, with his family, friends, and newfound allies standing beside him. He refused to give up. Change wouldn't come easily, but he believed it was worth fighting for. And as Angela often reminded him, sometimes the hardest battles lead to the sweetest victories. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding Part 4 or adjust anything. The tension at Lincoln Middle School continued to simmer, bubbling just beneath the surface. Angela's second meeting with Principal Thompson loomed on the horizon, and Marcus could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on him. He wanted to believe that things were finally moving in the right direction, but every day spent in Ms. Harper's classroom felt like a step backward. Her behavior had grown even more hostile since Angela's first visit, as if she were daring anyone to challenge her authority. One afternoon, during social studies class, Ms. Harper assigned a group project about cultural diversity. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He knew it was just another opportunity for her to mock students whose backgrounds didn't align with her narrow worldview. As groups formed around the room, Marcus found himself paired with Emily Carter, the quiet girl who had recently agreed to testify against Ms. Harper. Emily gave Marcus a small smile when their eyes met. "We've got this," she whispered reassuringly. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a glimmer of camaraderie. They decided to focus their presentation on West African traditions, drawing inspiration from Marcus's heritage. Together, they worked tirelessly after school, researching facts, creating colorful posters, and rehearsing their speech until it flowed naturally. When the day of the presentations arrived, Marcus and Emily stood nervously at the front of the class. Marcus took a deep breath, reminding himself why this mattered, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel inferior by Ms. Harper. As he began speaking, his voice grew stronger, filled with pride for his culture and history. Emily chimed in seamlessly, adding details about how these traditions influenced modern society. For a few moments it seemed like Ms. Harper might actually listen. But then, predictably, her disdain surfaced. "Interesting perspective," she said dryly, tapping her pen against her desk. "But I wonder if you two fully understand the complexity of what you're discussing. Some topics require maturity." Marcus clenched his fists, biting back a retort. Emily, however, surprised everyone by stepping forward. "Actually, Ms. Harper," she said calmly, "we put a lot of effort into understanding this topic. Maybe instead of doubting us, you could try learning something new." Gasps rippled through the classroom. No one had ever spoken to Ms. Harper like that before. Ms. Harper's face turned red, but she didn't respond. Instead, she scribbled something in her notebook and dismissed the class early. Marcus and Emily exchanged triumphant looks as they packed up their materials. It was a small victory, but it reminded them that standing up together made all the difference. Later that week, Angela returned to the school for her follow-up meeting with Principal Thompson. This time she brought reinforcements, printed copies of the testimonies collected from students, along with a summary of key incidents involving Ms. Harper. She also invited Marcus to attend, believing it was important for him to have a voice in the conversation. Principal Thompson greeted them with forced politeness, clearly unprepared for the mountain of evidence Angela had prepared. As she laid out each document, explaining its significance, his expression shifted from discomfort to outright panic. "Mrs. Johnson," he stammered, "this is overwhelming. I'll need time to review everything thoroughly." Angela nodded, though her patience was wearing thin. "I understand," she replied evenly. "But let me make one thing clear. My son and I aren't leaving until we see concrete steps being taken to address this issue. You can either work with us or face the consequences publicly." Her words hung heavy in the air. Principal Thompson hesitated, then promised to convene a meeting with the school board within the next week. He assured Angela that disciplinary action would be considered if the allegations proved true. Though skeptical, Angela accepted his response for now. As they left the office, Marcus felt a mix of emotions. Relief washed over him knowing that someone in power had finally acknowledged the problem. At the same time, doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Would anything really change? Or would the system protect Ms. Harper as it so often did for people like her? While Angela and Marcus focused on holding the school accountable, an unexpected twist unfolded elsewhere. Across town, Sarah Harper, Ms. Harper's estranged daughter, was scrolling through social media when a post caught her eye. A former IDR student of her mother's had shared a vague rant about racism in education, tagging Lincoln Middle School. Intrigued, Sarah clicked on the thread, where she discovered comments from current and past students detailing Ms. Harper's discriminatory behavior. Sarah sighed heavily, shaking her head. Growing up, she had witnessed her mother's prejudice firsthand. The offhand remarks, the dismissive attitudes toward anyone different from her. Their relationship had fractured years ago because of it, leading Sarah to cut ties completely. But seeing these accusations online reignited old wounds. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Determined to confront her mother, Sarah drove to Lincoln Middle School the following morning. When she arrived, she asked the secretary to direct her to Ms. Harper's classroom. The teacher looked up sharply when her daughter walked in, her jaw dropping in shock. "What are you doing here?" Ms. Harper demanded, her tone sharp. "I came to talk to you," Sarah replied coolly, closing the door behind her. "About the things I've been hearing." Ms. Harper crossed her arms defensively. "Hearing from whom? Gossip spreads faster than truth these days." "It's not gossip," Sarah shot back. "It's coming from your own students, and honestly, Mom, I'm not surprised. You've always treated people differently based on their race. Did you think no one would notice?" Ms. Harper bristled, her face turning red. "Don't lecture me about fairness. I've dedicated my life to teaching, and if some kids can't handle discipline, that's not my fault." "Discipline?" Sarah exclaimed, incredulously. "Or discrimination? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you've been poisoning young minds for decades. How many lives have you ruined with your hatred?" The argument escalated quickly, with both women raising their voices. Students outside the classroom glanced curiously at the closed door, wondering what was happening inside. Eventually, Ms. Harper snapped, "Get out! You don't belong here!" "No," Sarah said firmly, standing her ground. "Not until we settle this once and for all." Their confrontation spilled into the hallway, drawing the attention of teachers and administrators. Word spread rapidly, reaching Principal Thompson's office within minutes. By the end of the day, the entire school was buzzing with speculation about the mysterious visitor who had challenged Ms. Harper so boldly. Back at home, Marcus learned about Sarah's arrival from Emily, who had overheard snippets of the commotion. "Did you hear?" Emily whispered excitedly during lunch. "Someone came to yell at Ms. Harper. It was her daughter." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Her daughter? Why would she do that?" Emily shrugged. "Apparently, she found out about everything going on. People are saying it got pretty intense." Though Marcus didn't know exactly what to make of the news, one thing was clear. Karma had indeed arrived at Ms. Harper's doorstep. Whether it would lead to real change remained uncertain, but for the first time in months, Marcus allowed himself to feel hopeful. With Angela fighting tirelessly, allies like Emily standing by his side, and even Ms. Harper's own family turning against her, perhaps justice wasn't as far away as it seemed. Let me know if you'd like me to continue, expanding Part 5 or adjust anything further. The fallout from Sarah Harper's unexpected visit rippled through Lincoln Middle School like a storm. Students whispered excitedly in the hallways, teachers exchanged uneasy glances during lunch breaks, and administrators scrambled to contain the chaos. For Marcus, the buzz of gossip was impossible to ignore. Every corner he turned, someone seemed to be talking about Ms. Harper and her daughter's explosive confrontation. It wasn't just idle chatter. It felt like the entire school was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily Carter became Marcus's unofficial source of updates. She had a knack for picking up on details others missed thanks to her quiet demeanor and keen observation skills. During science class one afternoon, she leaned over and whispered, "Did you hear? The principal called an emergency meeting with all the teachers. They're probably trying to figure out how to handle this mess." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Do you think they'll finally do something about Ms. Harper?" Emily hesitated, then shrugged. "It's hard to say, but if Sarah keeps pushing, maybe they won't have a choice." As much as Marcus wanted to believe that change was imminent, doubt lingered in the back of his mind. He had seen too many instances where people in power chose to protect themselves, rather than stand up for what was right. Still, the image of Sarah standing up to her own mother gave him hope. If someone as close to Ms. Harper as her own daughter could call her out, perhaps others would find the courage to speak up too. Meanwhile, Angela continued her relentless pursuit of justice. After learning about Sarah's intervention, she reached out to her via email, expressing gratitude and offering support. To her surprise, Sarah responded almost immediately. "I'm sorry it took me so long to face her," Sarah wrote, "but now that I know the truth, I want to help however I can." Their exchange marked the beginning of an unlikely alliance. Over the next few days, Angela and Sarah collaborated closely, sharing information and strategizing ways to hold Ms. Harper accountable. Sarah provided insider knowledge about her mother's career, including past complaints that had been swept under the rug. In return, Angela shared the extensive evidence she and Marcus had gathered, along with testimonies from students who had suffered under Ms. Harper's bias. Together, they compiled a comprehensive report detailing years of discriminatory behavior, not just against Marcus, but against countless other students. The document included specific examples, dates, and even excerpts from the audio recordings Marcus had secretly captured. By the time they finished, it was clear that Ms. Harper's actions went far beyond isolated incidents. They were part of a systemic pattern of prejudice. With the report complete, Angela scheduled another meeting, this time with the school board. She knew it wouldn't be easy to get their attention, especially since Ms. Harper had built a reputation as a dedicated educator over decades. But armed with irrefutable evidence and Sarah's backing, Angela felt more confident than ever. Back at school, Marcus found himself growing closer to Emily. Their partnership during the Cultural Diversity Project had sparked a friendship that extended beyond the classroom. They started sitting together at lunch, discussing everything from homework to their favorite books. Emily often encouraged Marcus when he felt discouraged, reminding him that his voice mattered. "You've already inspired so many people," she told him one day as they walked home after school. "Even if things don't change overnight, you've shown everyone that it's okay to stand up for yourself." Marcus smiled faintly, appreciating her words. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that their efforts might not be enough. What if the school board dismissed their case? What if Ms. Harper somehow managed to wiggle her way out of trouble? His fears weren't unfounded. When Angela attended the school board meeting later that week, she faced resistance almost immediately. Several members argued that Ms. Harper's tenure and experience made her indispensable to the school. Others claimed that addressing the issue publicly would damage the institution's reputation. But Angela refused to back down. With Sarah by her side, she presented their findings methodically, ensuring that every member understood the severity of the situation. She highlighted not only the emotional toll on students but also the potential legal ramifications if the matter went unaddressed. "This isn't just about one teacher," Angela emphasized. "It's about creating a safe environment for all students. If we ignore this, we risk losing their trust and our integrity as educators." Her passionate plea struck a chord with some board members, particularly those who had children or grandchildren attending Lincoln Middle School. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. By the end of the meeting, a majority agreed to launch a formal investigation into Ms. Harper's conduct. While it wasn't a guarantee of consequences, it was progress, a step toward accountability. News of the investigation spread quickly, reaching Ms. Harper before anyone could break it to her gently. Furious and humiliated, she lashed out at anyone within earshot. During class, she snapped at students for minor infractions, assigning extra homework as punishment. Her mood swings grew increasingly erratic, leaving many wondering how long she could maintain her composure. One afternoon, while grading papers in the teacher's lounge, Ms. Harper vented her frustrations to a colleague. "Can you believe this?" she fumed, slamming a stack of essays onto the table. "My own daughter turning against me, and these parents thinking they can dictate how I run my classroom." Her colleague, a veteran teacher named Mr. Peterson, listened silently before responding, cautiously. "Look, Evelyn, I know you've been here a long time, but maybe it's worth considering their perspective. Times are changing, and so are expectations." Ms. Harper scoffed. "Expectations? Don't give me that nonsense. Discipline is discipline no matter the era." Mr. Peterson sighed, shaking his head. "All I'm saying is sometimes it pays to adapt. Otherwise, you risk getting left behind." Ms. Harper didn't respond, but the comment clearly unsettled her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that her methods might not be as infallible as she believed. Doubt crept into her thoughts, gnawing at her confidence. At home, Marcus noticed subtle changes in his mom's demeanor. Angela still carried the same fierce determination, but there was a newfound lightness in her step, a sense that they were finally gaining ground. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, she shared exciting news. Several parents had contacted her, thanking her for speaking out. Some even offered to join forces, forming a coalition to advocate for equity in education. "This isn't just about us anymore," Angela said proudly. "It's about making sure no child has to go through what you did. We're building something bigger than ourselves." Marcus nodded, feeling a swell of pride. For months he had carried the weight of Ms. Harper's cruelty alone. Now, surrounded by allies who believed in the cause, he realized he wasn't fighting this battle solo. Together, they were planting seeds of change, seeds that would, hopefully, grow into a brighter future for everyone. Little did they know, the drama was far from over. As the investigation progressed, secrets about Ms. Harper's past began to surface, secrets that would shake the foundation of her carefully constructed image. Meanwhile, Sarah grappled with conflicting emotions, torn between loyalty to her family and her moral compass. And Marcus, despite his growing strength, still wrestled with lingering doubts about whether true justice was possible. But one thing was certain: the wheels of karma were spinning faster than ever. Whether Ms. Harper liked it or not, the reckoning she had long avoided was closing in, and there was no escape. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding part 6 or adjust anything further.